Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning in to LO3 Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful Mountaineer State, also known as West Virginia. And today's date is Friday, July 31st, 2020. Man, time is flying. Woo! Hearing about universal mail-in ballots. Well, like this, folks, they assume everything should be centralized, okay? And it doesn't matter what party you're in. If you buy that, then you're just you failed your civic duties or your citizenship. No ands, ifs, or buts. Oh man, watching Fox News, I'm not too crazy about it. That was fun because I was like listening. So Barack Obama made a speech at Mr. Lewis's, Congressman Lewis's funeral pertaining to voter suppression. Politicizing at someone's funeral. Can we say contempt? In my eyes, damn straight. And it's interesting too because it looks and sounds more like a double to me, not Barack Hussein Obama himself. So always got to look at those areas. There's always been body doubles since Abraham Lincoln. So just to let you folks know about that. And I noticed too, there's everyone out there be safe in the Caribbean, along the coastline from Florida and up. Hurricane Isaias, Category 1 right now. Can be a Category 2 if possible. But I'm just looking at the National Hurricane Center's NOAA website. And the information is real good, no drama, anything like that. And they'll give you a good input. And I recommend folks go to Hurricane Track. Or Hurricane Track. That's on YouTube. He's very good as well. And he got some great videos too. So I always prefer those sites to get good information on what's happening in both Atlantic and Pacific coast. Well, I'm going to cut to the chase here. But a lot of things are going on. Looks like Fauci is going to be talking about a national mandatory mask ordeal. Please. How unmeritable is that? And folks, even in the workplaces, all you folks that are working essential or not, you have to have, according to OSHA standards, okay? According to OSHA standards, you have to have 19.25% oxygen. And you can look it up yourselves here. And of course, is a standard 29 CFR 1910-146. And under paragraph D2 IA and D2 IB, the respiratory protection standard. So, and even people who go into these places got to think the same way, even outside. Definitely look that up. Actually, you know what? I'm going to add this to the memo on the OSHA standards here. I'll add that. It's very good. It's good to know these things because the fact is, you gotta always look at things in the bigger picture. Even though maybe it may be unconstitutional, OSHA can be unconstitutional, but doesn't mean all their information is wrong. All right, and they got a lot of great input in there, and you can utilize it for what's going on with these mandatory masks, nanny states, and so forth. There's so much informational ammunition. You can beat these political bastards. It's not that hard. You gotta learn to talk, speak, and use decorum. They hate that more. Trust me, I've been there. I know how it is. So, I will add that to the memo. And without further ado, I want to be talking about a couple of things here. But this one, oops, hold on. Looks like I goofed. Where are you? Boom, right there. The Rutherford Institute's commentary came out a couple of days ago. John Whitehead, which I am a supporting member of this organization. I encourage everyone to go to rutherford.org to get involved. Donations would be great. More than what the ACLU can do for you. And I say that honorably. So, here's what he has to say. One nation under house arrest. How do COVID-19 mandates impact our freedoms? It's proper to take alarm at the first experiment on our liberties. We hold this prudent jealousy to the first duty of citizens and for the noblest characteristics of the late revolution. The freemen of America did not wait till usurped power had strengthened itself by exercise and strangled to question its presidents. They saw all the consequences in the principle, and they avoided the consequences, denying the principle. James Madison. We have become one nation under house arrest. You think we're any different from the Kentucky couple fitted out with the ankle monitor bracelet and forced to quarantine at home? We're not. Consider what happened to Elizabeth and Isaiah Linscott. Elizabeth took a precautionary diagnostic COVID-19 test before traveling to visit her parents and grandparents in Michigan. It came back positive. Elizabeth was asymptomatic for several coronavirus but had no symptoms. Her husband and infant daughter tested negative for the virus. Now in the country where freedom actually means something, the Lincotts would have the right to determine for themselves how to proceed responsibility, but in American police state, we've only got as much freedom as the government allows. That's not saying much. Indeed, it's a dangerous time for anyone who still clings to the ideas that freedom means the right to think for yourself and act responsibly according to your best judgment. In that regard, the Lincotts are a little old school in their thinking. When Elizabeth was asked to sign a self-quarantine order agreeing to check in daily with the health department and not to travel anywhere without approval, she refused. I shouldn't have to ask for consent because I am an adult who can make that decision. And as a citizen of the United States of America, this is my right to make that decision without having to disclose that to somebody else, said Elizabeth. So no, I wouldn't wear a mask. I would do everything that I could to make sure that I wouldn't come in contact with other people because of the fear that spreading this. But no, I would have to just stay home, take care of my child. Instead of signing the blanket statement, Elizabeth submitted her own written declaration. I will do my best to stay at home as I do every time I get sick, but I cannot comply to having to call public health department every time that I need to go out and do something. It is my right and freedoms to go where I please and not to have to answer to anyone for it. There's no pandemic, and with a survival rate of 99.9998%, I'm fine. I will continue to avoid the elderly, just like prior guideline states. Try to stay home, get rest, get medicine, and get better. I decline. And she has that right. She has natural rights under the Commonwealth's Constitution, including the right of privacy. All right, so we'll continue on here. A few days later, after being informed that Elizabeth's case was being escalated and referred to law enforcement, the Lincotts reportedly found their home surrounded by multiple government vehicles, government personnel, and the county sheriff, armed with a court order and ankle monitors. We didn't rob a store, Lincott said. We didn't steal something. We didn't hit and run. We didn't go anything wrong. That's the point, of course. In an age of overcriminalization, when the law is wielded like a hammer to force compliance to the government's dictates, whatever they might be, you don't have to do anything wrong to be fined, arrested, or subjected to raids and seizures and surveillance. Watch and see, just as I did. Just as it did in China. This pandemic is about to afford the government the perfect excuse for expanding its surveillance and data collection powers at our expense. On a daily basis, Americans are already relinquishing, in many cases voluntarily, the most intimate details of who we are, their biological makeup, our genetic blueprints, and our biometrics, facial characteristics, structures, fingerprints, iris scans, etc., in order to navigate an increasingly technologically enabled world. COVID-19, however, takes this surveillance to the next level. Another 24/7 excuse for everything. There has already been talk of mass testing of COVID-19 antibodies, screening checkpoints, contact tracing, immunity passports to allow those who have recovered from the virus to move around more freely, and snitch tip lines is requiring to rule breakers to the authorities. Yep, bend over bobs in plurality are everywhere because they can't even take care of themselves. They get off on busting others. I did my job. Thought criminals, right? They're looking for the thought criminals. As Reuters reports, as the United States began reopening its economy, some state officials are weighing whether house arrest monitoring technology, including ankle bracelets or location tracking apps, could be used to police quarantines and impose on coronavirus carriers. But while the tech has been used sporadically for U.S. quarantine enforcement over the past few weeks, large-scale rollouts have so far been held back by a legal question. Can officials impose electronic monitoring without the offense of a court order? More to the point, as the head of the one tech company asked, can you actually constitutionally monitor someone who's innocent? It's uncharted territory. Except this isn't exactly uncharted territory, is it? It follows much of the same pattern as every other state of emergency in recent years, legitimate or manufactured, that has empowered the government to add to its arsenal of technologies and powers. The war on terror, the war on drugs, the war on illegal immigration, asset forfeiture schemes, road safety schemes, school safety schemes, eminent domain, all of these programs started out as legitimate responses to pressing concerns and have since become weapons of compliance and control in the police state's hands. It doesn't even matter what the nature of the crisis might be. Civil unrest, the national emergencies, unforeseen economic collapse, lost functioning political legal order, purposeful domestic resistance or insurgency, pervasive public health emergencies, and catastrophic natural and human disasters, as long as it allows the government to justify all manner of government tyranny in the so-called name of national security. It's hard to know who to trust anymore. Certainly in this highly partisan age when everything from COVID-19 pandemic to police brutality to football is being recast in the light of one's political leanings, it can be incredibly difficult to separate what constitutes a genuine safety concern versus what is hyper-politicized propaganda. Take the mask mandates for example. Currently, 19 states have not issued mask mandates in response to the rising COVID-19 infection numbers. More than 30 states have enacted some form of mask requirement. A growing number of retailers, including Walmart, Target, and CVS, are also joining the mask mandate bandwagon. God bless corporatism, right? Georgia's governor, in a challenge to mask requirements by local governing bodies, filed a lawsuit challenging Atlanta dictates that masks may be worn within city limits. In some states, such as Indiana, where the masks are required, but there are also no penalties for non-compliance, government officials are urging people to protect themselves, but not to get into confrontations over masks or turn into snitches. In other states, such as Virginia, the nanny state is using more strong-handed tactics to force compliance with mask mandates, including the threat of fines, jail time, surprise inspection of businesses, and complaint hotlines that encourage citizens to snitch on each other. That's in Broward County, Florida as well, folks. Officials in Las Vegas deployed 100 compliance ambassadors to help educate and enhance enforcement of the state mask mandates. One couple in Knoxville, Tennessee, took the mask shaming to new heights when they created a Facebook page to track compliance by businesses, employees, and customers. In Miami, residents now risk a legal penalty if they venture into public without a mask. The city has assigned at least 39 police officers to make sure that residents are following the city's mandatory mask ordinance. Offenders will be warned, but if they refuse to reply, they will be fined. First offense will cost $100. Second offense will cost another $100. The third, God forbid, the offender will be arrested. Well, here's the thing for the city of Miami. If there's no victim, there's no crime. And what would Kathy Fernandez Rundle has to say? Know your rights. Exercise them, folks. These conflicting and, in some cases, heavy-handed approaches to a pandemic that has locked down the nation for close to 6 months is turning this health crisis into an unnecessarily politicized, bureaucratic tug-of-war with no clear-cut winners to be found. Certainly, this is not the first crisis to pit security concerns against freedom principles. In the post-9/11 world, we have been indoctrinated into fearing and mistrusting one another instead of fearing and mistrusting the government. As a result, we've been forced to travel this road many, many times with lamentably predictable results each time without fail. When asked to choose between safety and liberty, Americans historically tend to choose safety. Well, sorry about that, folks. I don't. Failing to read the fine print on such devil's bargains, we the people find ourselves repeatedly on the losing end as the government uses each crisis as a means of expanding its powers at taxpayers' expense. Extortion 101. Whatever these mask mandates might be authoritarian strong-arm tactic or health necessities to prevent further spread of the virus, they have thus far proven to be uphill legal battles for those hoping to challenge them in the courts as unconstitutional restrictions on their right to liberty, bodily autonomy, privacy, and health. In fact, Florida courts have upheld the mask ordinances, ruling that they do not infringe on constitutional rights and that there is no reasonable explanation of privacy as to whether one covers their nose and mouth in public places, which are the only places in which mask ordinances apply. Well, I have to disagree because remember, folks, that's an opinion. And you got to say natural rights. Come about Florida now. Article 1, Section 2, basic rights. Read it. Look it up and read. Learn and share. All right, so we'll proceed here. Declaring that there is no constitutional right to infect others, Circuit Court Judge John Kesternix concluded that the right to be free from government intrusion does not automatically or completely shield an individual's conduct from regulation. Moreover, wrote Kesternix, constitutional rights and the idea of limited government do not absolve a citizen from the real-world consequences of their individual choices, as long as you don't violate others, stupid, or otherwise allow them to wholly skirt their social obligation to their fellow Americans or to society as a whole. It is particularly true when one's individual choices can result in a drastic, costly, and sometimes deadly consequences to others. Virginia courts have also upheld mask mandates. These court decisions take their cue from 1905 U.S. Supreme Court decision in Jackson versus Massachusetts, in which the court upheld the authority of the states to enforce compulsory vaccination laws. Involuntary servitude. See, like I said, my friends, folks, think locally, act locally. I got to agree with Brian McKellen on this one. All right. In other words, the courts have concluded that the government has compelling interest in requiring masks to fight COVID-19 infections that overrides individual freedoms. Generally, the government has to show a so-called compelling state interest before it can override certain critical rights such as free speech, assembly, press, privacy, search and seizure, etc. Most of the time, the government lacks that compelling state interest, but still manages to violate those rights, setting itself up for legal battles further down the road. We can spend time debating the mask mandates, however, criticizing those who rightly fear these restrictions to be a slippery slope to further police state tactics will not restore the freedoms that have been willingly sacrificed on the altar of the national security by Americans of all political stripes over the years. As I've warned, this is a test to see how well the Constitution and our commitment to the principles enshrined in the Bill of Rights can survive a national crisis and true state of emergency. Don't forget your state's bill or Declaration of Rights as well, folks. Sometimes I know I love John Whitehead, but sometimes he uses the corporate doctrine, respectfully. But I always like to tell people go on your state constitutions as well, because it's essential. All right, so I'll just leave it at that. But it doesn't mean I'm going to condemn him, okay? Please. He does great work. It must be remembered that James Madison and the father of the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the fourth President of the United States advised that we should take alarm at the first experiment upon our liberties. Whether or not you consider these COVID-19 restrictions to be cause for alarm, they are far from the first experiment on our liberties. Indeed, whether or not you concede that the pandemic itself is a cause for alarm, we should all be alarmed by the government's response to this pandemic. By government, I'm not referring to one particular politician or administration, but the entire apparatus at every level that conspires to keep we the people fearful from one another and under virtual house arrest. We've all been reduced to prisoners in our skin, prisoners in our homes, prisoners in our communities, forced to comply with the government's shifting mandates about how to navigate this pandemic, or else. Right now, COVID-19 is a perfect excuse for the government to wreak havoc on our freedoms in the name of safety and security. But as I clear in my book, The Battlefield of America, the war on the American people don't believe for a minute that our safety is a police state's primary concern. And he is correct. And of course it's great because you can reprint it. You got permission to reprint it, all that. So like I said before to everyone, I use everything I narrate here is under fair use. But he is right. Kio bono, who benefits? The tyrants, the tyrannical elements in government, whether it's federal, state, or local. You guys got a lot of power. Don't let them tread on you. There's so much information on countering these things, these infections. Remember, every one of them has an Achilles heel or flaw. Like Ohio tried to ban hydrochloroquine. Why? So you can control your people, being enslaved? I'll tell you one thing, folks. Jury notification is the answer to these areas. If you get ticketed or if you get arrested for this, if it can get you on a criminal violation, ask for a jury trial of your peers. Sixth Amendment, right? But go to your state constitution as well. Like Florida, for example, Article 1, Section 22. No victim, no crime. Just another example of a deception. What are you going to do about it? I know what my job is, but what is yours? Something to think about. I'm going to do one more here. And this is a good article. Came out yesterday by Mises.org. Jeff Deist. He's the president of this organization. Good stuff, too. And he has great valid point. Keep those federal troops out of American cities. Here's what Ryan McMacken has to say. The violence and utter disregard for basic human rights and displayed by the left in recent years, combined with the left's support for war crimes when a Democrat is president, has made me inclined to play nice with conservatives these days. At least conservatives aren't planning to torch my neighborhood anytime soon. And at the moment, they are no worse than the left on foreign policy. He's right. On the other hand, sometimes even the relatively less bad guy for now come to some very dangerous conclusions. Specifically, some authors at conservative publications are now demanding that the president send in federal agents and troops to make arrests and intervene in local law enforcement, so as the pacify rioters in Portland and other American cities. These pundits are claiming that since local officials allegedly aren't responding with sufficient alacrity to rioters, it's time to send in federal troops. It is questionable that the president has the legal authority to do so, but even if he does have this power, legally speaking, basic common sense principles of subsidiary and decentralization against federal intervention. In other words, a basic respect for the principles behind the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence ought to cause one rejection the notion that it's a good idea to send in federal troops to solve the crime problems experienced in American cities. Here's one example in an article titled, "It's Time to Crush the New Rebellion Against Constitution." At Real Clear Politics, author Frank Malone claims, Frank Malay claims, the president is designated as a commander-in-chief and therefore shall be expected to act during the crisis of rebellion or invasion to restore public safety. Malay addresses two legal questions. First is whether or not federal troops or agents can act independently when protecting federal property, such as a federal courthouse. The second question is whether or not federal troops can intervene even when no federal property is under threat. Arguably, in the former case, federal agents would be well with their prerogatives to protect federal property, and a security guard might do. This, however, does not necessarily empower federal agents to make arrests or assault citizens outside of federal property itself on the streets of the city, well outside the federal compound. So-called constitutional sheriff's movement, which the hate left has its right. Local law enforcement ought to be the final authority when it comes to making arrests. Clearly, however, Malay will not brook such limitations, and he supports the idea that the federal troops can intervene where no federal property is involved. And what are the limitations of this federal power? Basically, there are none. In Malay's view, long as we define our adversaries as people fomenting a rebellion, nothing is off the table. Not surprisingly, Malay strikes a worshipful posture about Abraham Lincoln's scorched earth campaign against the southern states of the U.S. in the 1860s. Those people were rebels, you see, so the president was right to take bold action, even if it meant skirting the Constitution. I disagree with him on that. To me, that's called his essentializer on that rhetoric. Because there was never any doubt whether Lincoln's allegiance lay, it was perfectly fine when he abolished a basic legal right of Americans, such as the right of habeas corpus. The use of the word rebellion is central to understanding a pro-federal position here. Authors like Malay and Andrew McCarthy and at National Review have routinely used words like insurrection or rebellion in order to support their claim. The current unrest requires a Lincoln-like response, including the Lincolnesque abolition of half the Bill of Rights. The moral case of local control made by the American revolutionaries. As a legal matter, of course, I have no doubt that the federal judges and supporters of federal meddling could find a way to slice and dice the Constitution so as to make it say whatever they want. As a moral and historical question, however, it is clear that sending in federal troops without invitation from local leaders is blatantly contrary to the provisions of the Declaration of Independence and is contrary to the 10th Amendment. As I explained here, the Declaration lists the misuse of the executive, i.e. the King's troops, was a reason for the American Revolution of 1776. These troops must receive permission of local lawmakers. The American revolutionaries and those who ratified the U.S. Constitution thought they were creating a political system in which the bulk of land-based military power would rest in the hands of the state governments. Standing armies were to be strenuously opposed, and the Declaration of Independence specifically condemned the King's use of military deployments to enforce English law in the colonies and to render the military independent and superior to the civil power. These principles go back at least as far as the English Civil War, 1642 to 1651, when opposition to standing armies became widespread. Thus, any attempt to send in British troops without the approval of the colonial legislator was an abuse. This same principle was later applied to the state legislators in relation to federal power, sending in federal troops to override local officials in direct opposition to the moral underpinnings of the American Revolution. But this doesn't stop Malay, who insists in that Article 4 of the Constitution, authorities, federal invasions, because the text says the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a Republican form of government. According to Melee, the Republican form of government here means government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not for the mob. The definition of republic is something Melee apparently just made up. This is hardly a standard definition of a republic, especially in the 18th century, in context of most relevant for our purpose here. In those days, a republic mostly meant not a monarchy, and something like a decentralized state ruled by a commercial elite. Oh, I got that great, cool. The idea is that a president can send in troops where he likes, whatever we decide. A local government is not guaranteeing a republic based on whatever idiosyncratic definition of republic we might choose is dangerous indeed. In another example, we find authors Joseph D. Gianova and Victoria Toensing insisting because state and local government Democrat officials refuse to restore order, the federal government must. Enough is enough. Those responsibilities for this new wave of insurrection must face the full force of federal law. Note the language about insurrection as if a minuscule clash between some left-wing and right-wing demonstrators in Denver. An example the authors use to justify their position requires a federal invasion. Specifically, D. Gianova and Toensing we want federalism thrown out the window because of Michelle Malkin's supporters were battered by baton-wielding thugs before Macklin could ever deliver a speech in Denver. Presumably, governments are expected to intervene to prevent this sort of thing from happening. Yeah. But which government shall do that? It is a safe bet the authors of the Declaration of Independence would say a scuffle in Denver clearly lies within the authority of the government in Colorado. After all, the American patriots fought a war, as many died in it, to ensure local control out of the hands of a powerful executive in command of a standing army thousands of miles away. It is indeed true that the rights of those who wish to see Malkin speak were violated. But here's the thing, the rights of Americans are violated every single day in every American city. Murders, rapes, theft, and even gang warfares are unheard of across this action in and year out. Moreover, the data is clear that the police agencies are really quite bad in bringing these criminals to justice. So, should we call in the feds to solve these problems? There were more than 50 homicides just in the city of Denver last year. There are many more assaults and attempted murders. Doesn't this level of bloodshed constitute a sort of insurrection against the decent people of the city? Certainly, if we're going to be free to lose with terms like these, and as it now apparently, the MO of advocates for federal intervention, our conclusion could easily be yes. We might conclude that local police are unwilling to do what it takes to establish order and do something about these terrorists and thugs. Will sending in the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security will solve this problem? Fortunately, cooler heads have somehow prevailed and sending in the feds, and it's not a run-of-the-mill policy option. This makes even more sense when we remember that there is zero reason to assume federal cops are better at bringing peace to a city than the state of local officials. These feds are the same people and organizations who have been running a failed and disastrous war on drugs for decades. These people who spy on law-abiding Americans in blatant violation of the Bill of Rights, these are the people who were blindsided by 9/11 in spite of decades of fat paychecks to keep us safe. These are the people, i.e. especially the FBI, who have conspired against Americans in order to unseat democratically elected president. Unfortunately, old habits die hard, and the myth prevails on both left and right that if we're not getting the result we want from politicians, and the answer lies in calling in other politicians from somewhere else to solve the problem. But just as it would be contrary to basic notion of self-government and self-determination to call on the UN or the Chinese government to protect rights in the United States, the same is true of calling federal bureaucrats to fix the shortcomings and incompetence of state and local bureaucrats. The American revolutionaries created a decentralized, local-controlled polity for a reason. Abolishing federalism to achieve its shorter-term political ends is a reckless way to go. Can't debate with that. He is right. Everything's going to be from the ground up, not the top down. If you study history of nullification, you understand where I'm coming from. And of course, everything got to be approved by the state with the locals to get this done. If you want to bring in federal troops, it can be done legitimately in the Constitution. The people in those areas need to stand up too. You have natural rights as well. Bottom line is, folks, the police aren't obligated to protect you as an individual. If you got some pathetic, treasonous, or tyrannical garbage, you gotta call them out. If you've got recalls in those states, do it. To hell with them. If they're oath breakers, you treat them like they are criminals. So that's why they can protect the property. But if you're going to make arrests outside of that, it's invalid. I was against creation of Homeland Security after 9/11 because I see what was happening. And it's been done long time, even the Lincoln administration. When a couple of states wanted to secede, he brought in federal troops to occupy everything and threaten the capital of Annapolis, for example, in Maryland. We will destroy your capital if you secede. Look it up. There's great books out there. So, be proactive on the local level, folks. It's your cities, your state. You have duties as well, regardless, whether you agree or not. And that will be it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, if you send something that's interesting you want to check out, whatever you do, please send your correspondence to Decorum. Furthermore, I will leave the footnotes while I narrate it, and including the OSHA article on my Spreaker page. Everything under fair use once again. If you want to send me some donations, I recommend you support these sites as well that I narrated from. You can hit me at paypal.me/LokiLuck3. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.